All right. Welcome everyone to our panel on digitalization of the food value chain. We are honored to have people from two leading large companies in the sector, Lasse Köhler from Maersk Growth and Michael Pareles from Bayer Crop Science. Lasse Köhler is a senior venture analyst at Maersk Growth, which is the venture arm of the largest shipping company in the world, Maersk. Lasse holds a Master in Management of Innovation and Business Development from the Copenhagen Business School. Michael Pareles is a Global Digital Strategy and Growth Lead at Bayer Crop Science. Michael founded and helps lead Bayer's Blockchain Center of Excellence as part of its crop science digital strategy and innovation team. Michael also holds an MBA and MA from the Wharton School of Business and the Lauder Institute at the University of Pennsylvania. During the next 40 minutes, we will listen a brief presentation from each of them, starting with Lasse, and then we will start a conversation about supply chain stakeholders, coordination issues, COVID-19, and for sure, questions that you will be posting through the chat box or through the Ask a Question tab. So without further to add, I will let all the stage to Lasse.
Thank you very much, Alberto. Let me just see if I can share my screen here. Okay, I hope you can all see my screen now. Thank you very much for the invitation, Alberto. I think this is a super interesting conference, and glad to be in a format where it's actually COVID-19 protected. So that's great. I'll just start out by giving a short introduction to what we do here at Maersk Growth. We are the corporate venture arm of the Maersk Group, which is the biggest container shipping company in the world. We were founded in 2017 on the back of quite a large strategic transformation of Maersk Group. So we've been in the shipping business for 115 years, but in 2016 it was decided to pursue a new strategy and move away from being just a container shipping company and then expand our value proposition further into both ends of the supply chain. And that's now what we refer to as being the global integrator of container logistics. And what does that means in practice is that we essentially want to help our customers simplify their supply chains and essentially help them with all their logistics needs all the way from the farm and essentially all the way through to the end destination, whether that is at a store level or warehouse level or even to the end consumer. So that's quite a big strategic transformation when you consider that we've primarily been a shipping company in the past. Maersk Growth was founded in 2017 to support this transformation and really to keep an eye out for what is actually going on in the venture space. What are some of the interesting companies that we should collaborate and invest in now that have the potential to accelerate our transformation or potentially even disrupt it. Maersk is also one of the largest food transporters of the world today. We have the largest refrigerated fleet. So we are very integrated into a lot of food supply chains. That's also one of the reasons why we, about 2 years back, really start thinking about how can we develop our capabilities within the food system and food supply chains by looking into the venture space. And relatively quickly, we found out that food systems in general are quite inefficient. Probably doesn't come as a surprise to many of you. But if you look at it, then 1/3 of all the food produced for human consumption today is wasted, and a large part of that is wasted in the supply chain. So that's one of the reasons we started investing into the agri-food tech space. We're not so much looking at what at the asset level, which we define as stuff that can can improve the productivity at farm level. And we are not so much looking at what many refer to as food tech, which is more around how do we develop innovative new ingredients, alternative proteins, or create propositions towards the end consumer. What we're really interested in is to invest into technologies that will help us sort the messy middle. So everything from food leaves the farm and all the way up to retail. That's really our sweet spot. The way we work as a corporate venture unit is really to bridge the best from two worlds. We provide, of course, financial capital to the companies we invest in, as well as strategic value from Maersk. We are approximately 20 people in our setup here in Copenhagen, and half of us is working on the investment side of things, and the rest is what we refer to as our venture development team. They're really working with our portfolio companies to help accelerate their development going forward. Our investment thesis is essentially that we like to come in early. That's C to Series A, and we typically invest from $500,000 and up to $5 million. We do in principle have a global mandate, but for now we have focused our active deal sourcing on North America as well as key markets in Europe. But we are sourcing opportunistically. So if we see an interesting opportunity from Latin America or India or anywhere else in the world, we will take a look if it falls within our strategic scope. I think it's also important to mention from an investor's perspective that we try to mirror a traditional VC fund as much as possible. So the companies we invest in, they won't see any nasty terms in the term sheets. We invest alongside VCs, and that's really what we try to mirror also in our decision speed and processes. So that was a very brief introduction to what we do here at Maersk Growth. I only have 5 minutes, so I don't know how I'm doing on time, Alberto.
You're doing well.
Okay, that's great. I will leave the stage for Michael then.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Lasse. I will. Okay. So now, Michael, if you can share your screen.
Great. Excellent. Can you see my screen?
Yes. We can see the first slide. So now we need you to present full screen.
All right. Am I you seeing the full screen or presentation mode?
We are seeing the presentation mode.
All right. Better now?
Okay. Yeah, working perfect.
Great. All right. All right. Anyway, well, first of all, Alberto, I also want to thank you for putting this entire effort together. It's amazing to see where this conference has come from last year. 800 people. We're just floored, and Bear's obviously extremely happy to support. So it's a pleasure to be speaking to everyone, especially in this time of social distancing. As you can see, I'm in my kitchen, and you've given me an excuse to dress up a little. So I'd like to start our conversation on digitalization of food value chain with a joke that isn't really a joke. So some of you may have seen this meme bouncing around. I think those of you who've worked in the audience who've worked in big and small companies can appreciate the irony of this statement, right? How it's taken something of this impact for not just industry, but consumers alike, to realize not just the benefit, the need for digital technology to make our food systems resilient. But even if some of us are still fortunate to have jobs and jobs that we can do remotely, our food systems still have a long way to go to digitally transform, and a lot of the expense and risks of adopting new digital technology falls on individual farmers ourselves. And so my team, Digital Strategy, has a lot of initiatives and projects which focus on applying new digital technologies to the food value chain and farming specifically. And so I'll give you just quickly some words from some of the farmers that I've been working with on one of our pilots this past season. So Maggie, very concerned around risk, and so she said to us at some point, we gamble every day with every decision, every marketing decision, every chemical, every bean, fungicides you spray on, the tractor you buy. We don't know the odds. And then Chad, who is also working on us with this pilot in another area, really had some opinions around kind of how he as a farmer feels about technology more generally. And he said to us, I don't sit on the computer much. I don't get on it. If you sent me an email a week ago, I probably wouldn't get it for a while because I don't get that kind of stuff. I don't use technology the way a lot of these younger farmers and even older farmers do. So we see every day in our work trying to do piloting these new technologies into ag, that there's a huge, not just diversity in terms of value chain participants' comfort with technology, but also with their ability and the level of risk and impact that it can have to their operations. And for Maggie and Chad, the stakes can be higher. If they get a decision wrong, they could lose their homes or livelihoods. And so how companies like us, like ours, like Maersk and Bayer, enable them and the hundreds of millions of farmers like them to digitally transform their operations has huge impact on the kind of mega trends that we're going to see, and we're all actually already starting to see, which have been already said in this forum before, So we're dealing with rising population, changing economies and diet, which we have to have 50% more food, and a third of that food is wasted. Changing climate, which is going to reduce yields on the arable land we have, as well as reduce the amount of arable land we have, and the amount of arable land we have per person. So who's Bayer Crop Science, and what are we doing to try and help growers like Chad and Maggie solve those issues? So as Lasse alluded, we're part of a big faceless corporation, but a big faceless corporation that's focused on health and nutrition. So we are the crop science division of Bayer, which also has a pharmaceuticals division, a consumer health division. And so my team, we sit in the ag division, which is unique, I think, in the industry, not just because we're the industry leader, but because we have a portfolio of leading seeds and traits, leading crop protection, and we're also the leader in digital ag services, particularly through our subsidiary, the Climate Corporation. So really our mission now is bring all three of those things together to create tailored solutions for growers like Chad and Maggie, so they can sustainably manage their resources and improve their productivity and their livelihoods, essentially, help them kind of get more value, from this huge food value chain, which we're working in. And we do that in a variety of ways. So my team is based in St. Louis and Germany, and we rely not just on internal R&D, but what our team does really is we prospect new digital technologies, think decision sciences, IoT, robot process automation, blockchain, and we bring them into the organization, and often because of our market position, into the industry for the first time for POCs and pilots. And if they move, just like in an R&D pipeline for pharma or biotech, as they succeed, they move eventually to commercialization. If they don't succeed, they move out of the funnel. So we do that in a variety of ways, through collaborations with universities and research institutes, through crowdsourcing. We have a venture capital team that also works with other venture capital teams like Maersk Growth, innovation centers, as well as just technology collaborations with other leading companies. my team specifically, I help lead our Bear Blockchain COE, Center of Excellence. And we have really focused over the last 2.5 years on how can we bring this technology, which really, as we'll get more into, links firms and users up and down the value chain for the first time in a way that's secure. How do we help our company as well as our partners become more comfortable with technology and really get value from it, more than just kind of like a shiny object. And one of the ways we've done that over the past 2 years is we've been piloting a traceability system for grain, first in the United States, and then we're going to be moving it globally, which tracks seed from us, the tech provider, to the dealer, right? That's our distribution point, to the grower and farmer, and then all the way to the grain elevator, which in this slide is the processor. So we've had extremely encouraging results over the past 2 years of pilots, and I'm happy to get into a little more detail on it. But we think that systems like these, technologies like these, are really going to be the key to digitalizing the entire food value chain, not just to make sure that in crises like this pandemic, we can be resilient and maintain continuity of the food supply, but also to make sure that participants right throughout the value chain, like farmers, like Chad and Maggie, can be de-risked, right? Don't have to take on that entire burden of adopting new technology, and can get the value that they're really bringing right to these food systems. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Alberto and Lasse in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael and Lasse, for your presentation. Very interesting how both companies are somewhat targeting the whole food value chain, for sure, in different stages. So one of the topics that we were discussing yesterday was about how customers are asking for more food transparency and traceability, such as the example that Michael showed. So I would like to know, from your perspective, Lasse, more on the closer to the consumer, after some raw products are already processed, like what are the technologies that you are looking that are helping to ensure this authenticity, the trust, and the coordination among all these players?
Yeah, so I think if you talk about end consumers, Maersk is probably not the company to ask, because we deal strictly with B2B, and that's what we've always done. But of course, we take a part in potentially data points to the transparency journey. And I think if you look at provenance solutions, I think it's obvious that consumers are demanding more and more visibility on the products that they're buying, and I think it's a natural. For us, that's not really the most interesting piece around blockchain per se or other transparency solutions. What we really find interesting about collecting these data that can eventually be used for end consumer visibility is to have a central data repository where you can actually start aggregating data, and for some use cases use it to ensure whether or show whether your organic avocado is actually organic or not. But it's also that data integration or aggregation that would allow you to actually start analyzing where are the inefficiencies in your supply chain, and start to actually run some of those computations that will essentially improve your value proposition towards the end consumer, but also help you to optimize the supply chain operations.
Perfect, thank you. So, and Michael, on your end, I know you mentioned this example with the soybean, but we have also seen in the news that you are doing some work in China with Alibaba, correctly, if I'm not wrong. So if you can also tell us a little bit more about what you are doing, what particular part you are tracing or improving.
Yeah, sure. The Alibaba collaboration is, really interesting and it's slightly different because it's more focused. Whereas we've been working in the United States, and primarily our business is focused on row crops, right? Corn, soy, cotton, canola. We are also the largest player in veg and horticulture, and so the Alibaba collaboration is really focused on helping to provide consumers in China with traceability around what's been applied to orchard crops. Right, and the issues there are a little bit different, right? When you're talking about row crops, most of that is not going to, 85% of that's going to end up in animal feed or in ethanol. Very little of that ends up on somebody's plate. And so, like Lasse said, there we're really still working B2B. We're working in horticulture. It really is, it's an orange that someone's going to put on the table with their kid. It has a lot more to do, especially in China, with the food system there, around providing consumers with a degree of peace of mind, maybe peace of mind they're willing to pay more for, and then having that go back to the grower who is spending a lot of resources to allow those consumers to be willing to see that information. And I think it's a little bit, that kind of maybe goes into maybe one of the questions that got asked, which is kind of what's the biggest challenge that we see with traceability and implementing it from our perspective is who's going to pay for it. I think there's a lot of people think that consumers really want traceability, but then what a lot of CPG companies see is that people are still going for the cheaper item, right? It's still extremely price sensitive, and so I think particularly when you're talking about upstream players who do not have the point of sale, a lot of the premium that would get captured will go to those retailers, right? The Walmarts of the world or the Whole Foods or whomever. But it doesn't, and then there's several steps before it gets back to the grower. Technologies like blockchain can help better distribute that value all the way to the farmer and everyone who kind of contributes to that traceability. But we're not there yet. And it's not in the thesis that people are willing to pay for traceability, particularly in a system where the food supply is actually safe as a standard from a regular perspective, just hasn't necessarily been borne out yet. And it's hard for farmers or dealers who have kind of very thin profit margins to begin with to make the investments in technology today, which they won't see benefits for years.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Michael. So in that case, Lasse, from your perspective, you said you are a player in the middle of all these actors from the farm to fork, that it's called. So how do you see the value of and how do you think you can coordinate all these actors? Like, why would they trust that Maersk or a Maersk investment will be at the very end the ultimate database with all this information?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and so I think what the general notion around digitizing the food system is that it doesn't matter unless the vast majority of stakeholders are actually digitized. There is some kind of critical mass that you actually need to get to. And I think we've seen a lot of really, really good innovation across the entire chain over the last couple of years. But it's still relatively fragmented. So where we saw in the past that there's a lot of data kept and siloed across stakeholders that was not digitized and not shared, we are now seeing it increasingly being digitized, but it's still siloed in the sense that not a whole lot of these systems are actually talking together. And I think what we can bring to the table, and also Michael can bring to the table, is because we have such a broad interaction with a lot of the potential users, both downstream and upstream, we can actually help push a certain standard or push a certain technology that we believe in. Perfect.
And a follow-up question for you, Lasse. Some people from the audience were asking, what about applications of traceability or investment from Maersk growth in developing economies such as Asia or India? Like, what type of applications of all these technologies do you see there, where all the production is different with small holders, maybe not those big shipping containers that we are used to see in other parts of the world?
Yeah, so I think it's a super relevant question, and I think both Southeast Asia, India, and Africa, and to some extent Latin America as well, is super. They are to be the growth drivers. As Michael mentioned, then in the next 30 years, we have to produce significant more food than we do today in order to feed the global population. And a lot of that production will eventually have to come from some of these areas. One of the big issues when you deal with smallholder farmers is, of course, that you need to aggregate a lot of the food, and you need to ensure that the quality is, at least if you want to export it, that the quality is of a certain standard and a similar standard. So I think plays that are, or technologies that are aggregating and ensuring that the quality and the storage conditions are in the right place for the produce to actually stay fresh and enable it to be exported is super interesting, and something that we have looked into as well.
Perfect. And Michael, what about from the buyer perspective? We know that you're present in almost every country, but how different is the application of these technologies that you are trying, like with this different reality that you face?
Yeah, because definitely one of the biggest challenges that we found in the application of digitalization technologies like blockchain is, right, when you're talking about farming, you have a physical asset, and how do you turn that physical asset into some sort of digital asset that you can then track through some sort of residual system? So in kind of more developed countries and row crops, we have a product called Climate Field View, and that essentially goes on tractors and can help take the information that's coming in from the tractor and put it into the cloud, and then you can help growers by analyzing it and things like that. In India, actually, we have a product called FarmRise, right? But for those farmers, dealing with like less than 10 acres in some places, like China, the average farm size is like 8 acres, I think less than 8 acres. And they're not digital systems at all. So we have FarmRise is an app which actually is enabled even for non-smartphones to help give advice, where growers can speak to an operator and basically record their information. And that's the way that we turn the physical asset into some sort of digitized asset that then we can analyze and help give real feedback back to the growers. Granted, that still has a big manual interface. It's not as smooth or easy as when we're just able to leverage the sensors that are already on a tractor, but it's a step in the right direction, right? Because all this digitalization is incremental. If we think about it just as you either have full traceability or you don't have full traceability, right? We're never going to get anywhere. And I think one of the reasons why teams like mine and Lasse's exist is for larger companies like us, which have the resources to have a long-term vision. We can make either the big bets or a lot of small bets to help others who don't have that sort of flexibility or the ability to plan that long-term benefit and de-risk from this kind of ecosystem of technology, which may or may not work out.
Great, thank you very much. So, talking about bets and the exciting busy world, Lasse, can you talk us a little bit, like some examples of companies or investment that you have made that are related to food traceability? Or I understand you can invest in whole transport system, but I would like to narrow it more into the food system that you can share with us.
Yes, so we have a number of portfolio companies within the food vertical. One of them, I'll do a small announcement. One of them, Ripe.io, will be speaking later today. So make sure to tune in for that one. And Ripe is developing a blockchain solution that are essentially capturing a lot of data points across the supply chain, both for the provenance and visibility purposes, but as I mentioned earlier, I think one of the really interesting aspects is what can you start doing with that data once it's actually been established, and how can you start using that to optimize some of the processes in the supply chain. We also have a few other companies focusing more around data capturing or capturing data at certain points of the supply chain. So one of our other portfolio companies is a company called Spoiler Alert, and they essentially go in and analyze inventory levels at wholesale and identify what types of goods actually in high risk of expiring. So we know that in advance of time, we can actually start doing either transporting it to or selling it to another market, or transporting it somewhere else where there is a demand. We also have an investment in a company called Telesense, which is monitoring grain and monitoring the quality of grain in through IoT device. So we have a lot of, as you can see, we have a lot of bets along the supply chain that tallies well with our notion of we need to think the supply chain in a holistic way in order to actually move the needle. But a lot of what we invest in is around this data capture and data analytics. And then we also have a focus area around more, I wouldn't say low practical, but stuff that actually improves parameters such as shelf life. One of our other portfolio companies is called Starchy, and they basically they're developing an edible coating. So various veg and fruits can actually extend their shelf life. So that's also another component in what we're looking into.
Perfect, thank you. Well, one person from the audience, Philip Harris, asked me to compliment Michael on your choice of the bow tie. And also, he has a question related with the complexity of serialization and tracking when dealing with commodity crops such as corn and soy, given like all the volumes. So are you starting from smaller trades like with organic or specific, I don't know the special concept, but
yeah.
like
I think
varieties?
I think I understand where Phil's going. So certainly, right, when we're talking about this idea of how do you not just introduce technology, but introduce technology in a way that is operationally, environmentally, and financially sustainable, the places where you're going to be able to prove the value of the expense are products which are higher margin. And that's why when you talk, especially when you're talking about traceability and blockchain applications to food, you're usually at first talking about either premium products, right? People want to know where kind of their high margin meat or produce come from, or in the case of what Walmart's been doing with IBM, it's really focused on going after the huge delta of food recalls and kind of what the impact they have on public safety, as well as the expense that's borne by the industry for that. And so for us, we are also focused first on specialty grain products. That having been said, right, so there's already a lot of channeling, right, of specialty products, whether it's organic or non-organic, or certain grains that are meant for human consumption specifically and not industrial usage. So we'll focus on those first, since those are already kind of channeled markets. But the technology we build for those is applicable to all grains, especially corn and soy, which are pretty similar. And so once if you can justify the expense with those niche products, then the technology and systems you've built, because they're often the same systems and the same entities that are operating both those sides of the coin, it really lowers the cost and effort of being able to track the entire chain. And what's interesting about kind of this implementation is that you don't need to tag the grain, you don't need to tag the seed, you don't need to have a QR code. All these entities, right? A company like ours, our dealers, the farmer who has a tractor that has something like Climate Field View or another similar system, they already have a digital system which tracks the grain or the seed while it's in their possession. So simply by linking those digital systems, you already create a level of traceability and transparency that was not previously possible. So I maybe that goes a little bit beyond what Phil had asked, but I think it's a level of insight that someone else had. It's exactly how are we doing that? And so we at Bayer have kind of taken on how do we provide that level of traceability for the area where we play mostly, which is between the input provider and the elevator. And then companies like Cargill and Bunge or Walmart, they're doing that same thing for the parts of the value chain where they play. And as long as it's all on a compatible blockchain or even an incompatible blockchain, because we're getting interoperability all the time, we can connect them and provide full traceability from the seed all the way to the consumer without any of us having to build the entire end-to-end system. Because we're not going to tell Walmart what to do with their traceability and their supply chain. They're so far downstream. Hopefully, they wouldn't tell us either, right?
Perfect. So, one question that everyone has been answering now, this goes to Lasse, is how the coronavirus is changing the way that you analyze all these complex systems. How do you think this new normality will change the way commerce is performed, and what opportunities may arise for a company such as Maersk Growth that is actively looking?
Yeah, so I think if we look at it from an investor startup perspective, then I think we have seen a slowdown and a lot of investors really looking to support their own portfolio at the moment. So I think the uptake of opportunities will probably be a bit low over the next 6 months. What I think is super interesting, and what I think one of the longer term outcomes of Corona will actually be improved supply chain resilience. And we hear that over and over again in a lot of different industries, but I think particularly for the food supply chains, that's very relevant. And I think in order to actually create supply chain resilience and actually create flexibility, I think digitization and automation of a lot of processes is going to be fundamental. So for an importer of produce, you need to relatively quickly be able to actually figure out where should I buy from if the current suppliers that I have are not able to meet my demand. And I think we see that now from a produce outcome perspective, that there's to some extent limited supply, but I also think we will see that supply chain resilience more skewed towards future procurement operations. So you would like to have better flexibility and more options going forward from where to choose from. So I think in order to get that, we need to have a lot of the suppliers and stakeholders in the entire chain digitized, but because that's the only way where we can actually get that overview.
Michael, anything in your end? How you think the world is changing, and more specifically related?
So, and actually, I just wanted to say, before I used to work, actually, early in my career, I started working in the beef and pork industry, and I worked for the union, which represents meatpacking workers in the United States. So a lot of the issues with plants are very much in my memory. And I just want to first say that I hope we all are really thinking about the health and safety of meatpacking workers and their families who are helping make sure that we have all those things in the course of this pandemic. And so now, in this role I have now, really focused on grain, much of which ends up right in animal feed, which then ends up in hogs and chickens and pigs, which end up on our plate. I really think the potential for this technology and having, as Lasse said, all participants being digitized and bringing that information to the chain can help us as we think not just about the resilience of being able to make sure that food gets on our plates in the course of all these challenges, but also that and that the food itself is safe, but also that it's produced in a way that preserves the safety of everyone who works on it, whether they be in a meatpacking plant or on a farm or sitting at a desk in their kitchen. And I think we increasingly have the ability to do that, and it's something that we as consumers and as workers need to demand and be willing to pay for if we want it to actually be something that the industries like ours adopt long term.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, we ran out of time, but for those that would like to stay engaged with this conversation, the next panel will be with 3 different startups that are related with food safety and traceability. So you will be able to keep understanding their view, not from large established companies, but from the disruptor perspective. So I would like to thank both Michael and Lasse for your time, for being open from the first cold email that I sent you both, and to help us make this floored, as Michael said. So we appreciate very much your help. So I hope you both stay safe. And for the audience, please keep engaged. We will start in a couple of minutes with the next panel. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.